I'm going to start the Pro Tools here. All right, and we are live, I think. Let's see here. I do believe it. Yep, looks like we're in. We're in the Matrix. Want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Friday, December 11th. I've got a very special guest with me tonight. I've got saxophonist Bill Evans, who's just recently moved to Nashville. He's going to be with me the entire time here. We're going to take some questions. I've got a bunch of questions to ask him. I've got some things I need to talk to you about, Bill. And but thank you very much for coming out tonight and joining us. I think my mom's tuning in. Hey, Connie. Everybody say hi to Connie. And love you, Mom. It's great to, well, I saw you earlier. So thanks for tuning in once again. I'm going to listen to a little music here before we jump into some of Bill's stuff. This is a piece that I recorded a couple weeks back. Playing everything on it. Not playing drums well, but I'm playing drums and the tenor and bells and the vocal stuff. So this is what is this thing called anyway? I can't remember. What is this thing called, love? This is called Wearing My Pluto Shoes, for good reason.
I was going to say that.
Yeah. Sing along if you know the words.
Yeah.
This is the tender part.
The ultra sensitive section.
That's right. We need like some luscious strings through here, you know?
It is odd.
All right.
Nice.
Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to yet another installment of In the Studio, Friday, December 11th. And like I said, once again, we really happy to have you here checking it out, spending a little time with us on your Friday. And my guest tonight is another saxophonist. you may have noticed I have sort of a penchant for bringing on other saxophonists onto my show, which I really love. It's fantastic. And tonight we have the one and only Bill Evans, who just recently moved to Nashville. What, Bill? A couple months ago now? Not even.
Yeah, about 2.5 months ago.
Yeah, 2.5 months. And he's living about 15 minutes away from me, which is very exciting. So we get to visit and socially distance. And yesterday we were out there with our chainsaws cutting down some wood, which was really fun.
Right. That was a blast.
And so some of you may know Bill from his work with Miles Davis. When did you start playing with Miles? Late 70s, early 80s?
No, I was 9 years old, Jeff.
You're 9 years old.
I was 9 years old.
Did you have one of those little plastic Fisher Price horns?
Yeah, and I had to get permission to go on the road with him. No, I was 21.
You were 21, okay.
I was 9 years old. No, I was 21 years old, yeah. And yeah, it was like coming from college, and like basically immediately from college. So
yeah,
I really couldn't sort of compare it to any other gig, you know. So
I might as well just start at the top, you know. What the heck?
yeah, I was going to retire in 3 years, call it a day. But no, you know, looking back, and it's a while ago now, but it was, you know, a tremendous experience to have gone through it the way I did. It wasn't like for me being a member of a group where you join a band, you play music, you socialize a little bit, and you move on. It was much deeper than that for me because I was helping to put the band together. You know what I mean? So it's like I got to know him as a friend in the beginning, as his liaison to the outside world, because he was coming out of retirement. And so I'm his connection. And so it was a trip. It was really a trip. Like, you know, at the time to think, you know, the guy I'm hanging out with every day is my new best friend is Miles Davis. You know, it was kind of a trip.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to get into that a little deeper, a little further along in this, because there's a lot to cover there, and so I have a bunch of questions about that as well. But first off, you know, I want to say that your music, your sound, your musical intention. They've all really influenced me in my own personal career. I got hip to your stuff through the early 80s Miles stuff. We were talking earlier tonight. Your first record, "Living in the Crest of a Wave," was a record that I listened to a lot back in the day, and I had it on vinyl, and I went back and revisited it last night, and I remember thinking, like, last night I was like, man, I wonder if some of this is going to still sound really familiar to me. You know, I was just kind of interested in my own experience going back, listening to something that I had checked out a lot during the day.
Right.
And it was, man, it was very interesting. It was sort of like finding an old blanket somewhere. You're like, oh, I remember this. This feels really good, you know? And so, you know, again, I started listening to you in the 80s, and your playing has been part of the fabric of my own personal development. And you know, I remember hearing you at the Village Vanguard one time many years ago when I was up there visiting, and you've always had a very contemporary approach to the instrument, a unique approach, not only of sound, but kind of your concept of the music also. I love your compositions and the thoughtfulness of them. The rhythmic interplay is one of the things in particular that I really take away from your music. And so first and foremost, I want to say thank you for being such a badass and putting out such great music into the world, man. As a saxophone player, you're one of the cats, man. I mean, you're such a beautiful, beautiful player. So thank you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. No, I appreciate it. Thanks for what you said. I appreciate it. But you know how it is. We're students of this music and what we do for life. You know,
absolutely.
And it's one of those things. And you've done so many creative things throughout all the years. You know, and it's like I feel like we've been following sort of the same path in a lot of ways how we approach music. We want to do things that are inspirational. We want to do things that are fresh to us and hopefully to people that are listening. And
sure.
And I always say it, I call it like a curse, but I say that a curse in a positive way because, you know, from the very beginning, ever since I was playing with Miles, Miles always said, believe in the music that you hear in your head. You believe it and other people will believe it.
Hmm.
So it's like, I watched him and talked to him enough in the very beginning. It was very impressionable to me. So I would have confidence in what I was going to do for myself as a musician.
So, so it is what you're saying that the intention of what you're doing, like sort of the vision of what you're doing and the intention of what you're putting out there is a big part of how you approach things.
Yeah, and it's never the easiest road. It rarely is.
Right.
I mean, because for instance, in 1990, 91, I was recording with rappers and singers before you could go out and buy records with that.
Yeah.
And I just really loved it. And it was something that I heard in my head as a way to be inspirational to myself. I didn't know if anybody was going to hear it. You know what I mean? Every time I've ever done anything, I don't know if people are going to like it or not.
Right.
But I do it because I'm really inspired to do it, and it gets me off doing it. You know what I
Right.
mean?
So we talked just a second ago. I mentioned about the rhythmic component of your playing. So I'm curious. You were in New York at the time, early '90s, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious when you were hearing rap, when you were listening to that and integrating that in, there weren't a whole lot of people that were doing it. Certainly not many people in the quote unquote improvisatory jazz world.
No.
So I'm curious, what was it about that hit you hard enough that you were like, man, this is some shit that I need to bring into my music?
Well, it's a trip, and that's a good question. Because I wasn't being influenced by anybody else doing something similar to what I wanted to do.
Right.
So for me, it was something where, and if you'd have asked me 5 years before that, would you ever use a rapper on a record? I'd say you got to be out of your mind, because I didn't hear it at the time.
Yeah.
It would be something where I'd be tuning to like 97.1 and listening to all these really cool grooves. And then I started hearing rappers as a rhythmic instrument. And then I started hearing the saxophone and chords and a guy rapping over it rhythmically. And then all of a sudden it just kind of snaps. That's cool. I got to try that. And then it could happen in a nanosecond. And then all of a sudden it's like, I got to start doing this. Is really cool.
Yeah.
And then, but the most exciting thing for me in any of the phases that I'm in is getting an idea in my head that might be kind of a crazy thought musically, and then start working on it. And it just started as a spark in my head. And then all of a sudden to see the vision live in a concert, people are digging the music, and now it's a reality. To go from that spark to the reality is what it's about. And I love that. I love when that.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. It's kind of seeing that vision, always seeing I always see the end result first. And I just try to have the first part meet the end part. And I just see it until it's a reality. It's sort of like, I don't know, I've always been that way.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And, it seems like, again, coming back to your first record, it seems like the vision that you have for music is like you hear things in an unusual way. Like it's surprising to me. And even how old were you when you did Living in the Crest of a Wave? Do you know?
Well, let me think now. Back to that time. Let me see. Living in the Crest of a Wave was like 1983, 84. So maybe 24, 25.
Okay.
25. 26. Do we hear 27? No, I think I was 1980.
So early mid-20s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to me that record. It seems like there's a lot of world music influences on there. There's a lot of rhythm. There's. Am I correct that there's a lot of Brazilian influence in that music for you, or was that sort of what the Cats brought to the table with that record?
That's kind of what they brought as well. But at the time I was listening to contemporary music, which is like the contemporary radio stations in New York. So at that time you're hearing Weather Report, and you're hearing Pat Metheny, and you're hearing all these different sort of like, new groups at the time that were very refreshing to listen to. And that was influencing me. Mm-hmm. So when I was writing, I just I felt, I wanted to do something contemporary that I like to play, and with the players that I like to play with. Yeah. So it was, that's kind of how it was.
I mean, it's an auspicious debut. I mean, there's, we were talking about that the other day, like the difference between something like what you did with that record and what Kenny Garrett did is very different, and neither is more or less valid than the other, of course. I'm just saying that they're very different approaches to the music, and I think that's one of the reasons that for me, your music has always really, no pun intended, but really struck a chord within me, and because I really felt that, like I remember listening to Johnny Griffin, for example, and thinking like, man, there's nobody that's going to play those tunes any better than that cat, and Train and Sonny and all those guys, and being influenced, but even with Mike Brecker, like hearing cats at North Texas, you were there before I was, that were shredding his solos, and I just thought, man, that's a dead end.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brilliant. I love it. It's so powerful, but I never wanted to clone anybody. And that's one of the things with you. You're so refreshing in that sense that you're not cloning anybody. You are very uniquely Bill Evans.
Well, I don't even know what that is, but you know what? What I got into, which I thought was really cool, especially coming up, I would think like, okay, like if I had my horn, I could like demonstrate a bunch of different saxophone players. For instance, I could do my Joe Henderson thing. So there was a point in New York where I was going through 78, 79, 80, I was going through like a Joe Henderson phase. I wanted to understand exactly how Joe Henderson, no bar lines, floated over the horn. So I'd go see him play a lot in person. I'd sit in front of him and I realized he's not he's not stomping his foot. He's completely relaxed. He's got the horn in front of him and he's just floating over the chords. Just so I started incorporating it. I started staying more relaxed and I started playing like that. So I could and I did a record at the time with Ron Carter called Etudes with Tony Williams on drums and Art Farmer on trumpet. And you could hear the Joe Henderson sort of influence in the thing. And then I went through the Sonny Rollins, like his Don Cherry phase. So I started much harder on the saxophone. I'd see Sonny Rollins playing and I'm like biting on the horn and I'm like, but very, but I had to see them. I wanted to emulate them. I wasn't memorizing any of their lines. I was just trying to play that style, but I would really get into it. And then you just naturally move on. So I was going from player to player to really understand what I thought they were doing. And then what that does is it just gives you a freedom on your horn to do what you do. Because I never got into memorizing like I just never did that. It's great to practice. And there's times when I'll say, all right, I'm going to try to think consciously. If I just do this in all the different keys, but that's not what really helped me play. You know what I mean? Technically, it's great, but I didn't spend time on that. I tried to emulate these different ways these guys spoke on their instrument, and that gave me more fluidity.
Yeah. Yeah.
You did a thing one time, as a matter of fact, you were playing with Bela Fleck, and I was on the side of the stage, and you did something like a, and I went, oh, and I went back, and I started, and I'm like thinking like, okay, how you were standing, you know what I mean? I mean, I'm like trying to like get something from everybody, yourself included. Anyway.
Well, so well, I'm flattered. I'm sure I stole that from somebody else.
No, everybody gets everything from everywhere. Yeah.
Well, of course. So the importance, and this is something that we try to stress to our students at Vanderbilt, and when I do clinics and workshops, things like the Gen Conference, et cetera, the importance of experiencing somebody live. Like I remember seeing Pharoah Sanders at what was the place in Fort Worth? Oh, Caravan of Dreams. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was there when you were there or not, but seeing guys like Pharoah and McCoy Tyner, Freddie Hubbard, et cetera, and sitting as close as I could to do exactly what you were talking about, to watch how they played.
Yeah.
And I remember it making such a difference for me also. Their body language, their body motion, the relaxation in their bodies, watching what was going on with their embouchure, witnessing their interaction live with the other musicians on stage. All these things profoundly influenced me.
Oh, and, absolutely.
So again, reiterating the importance of of live music and going in to check that out, you know?
I used to go hear Dave Liebman's band all the time.
Hmm.
And I used to watch Dave play. In certain ways, he'd play soprano, in certain ways.
Yeah.
And I did the same with Dave. And I remember at the time, Dave saying, like, he heard me a few times going, like, man, that's getting a little bit scary close, you know. But when I get into a guy, I really get into trying to figure out, you know, how a person's playing it. But you end up eventually, you just naturally move on to what's natural to you. But all these give you a little more fluidity,
Sure.
just to be able to say more on your instrument. You know what
Right.
I mean? It's fun.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
really get into that stuff.
Yeah. Hey, one tune in particular, going back to that first record, "The Young and Old."
Yeah.
Um, that to me, you know, it had a very sort of ECM vibe, you know, that kind of Euro jazz kind of thing, and um, you know, remind me of some of the Jan Gabarek stuff, and you know, I mean, I hear that very kind of soaring tone that you have also, and obviously, you know, we're all indebted to John Coltrane on some level.
Mm-hmm.
When I hear Jan Gabarek, I remember reading an interview one time where he talked about his early influences being like the only albums he could find on Coltrane were the late stuff, like Interstellar Space, Transition, that kind of stuff. So his sound developed from hearing those records, which, you know, is that very
Interesting.
intense, you know, you listen to Jan and you go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just kind of wondering your experience with, you know, not only Jan's music, but also the later Coltrane stuff. And sort of, you know, and just kind of talking about sound and maybe delve into that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It took me till I was about 15 to get into Coltrane because I was into Sonny Stitt
Mm-hmm.
and I was into Stan Getz, and I just wanted to be very clean, very happening. I wanted every line to make sense. So when I first started hearing John Coltrane playing all over the place, it sounded to me like he was missing stuff, you know. And then I heard Wayne Shorter, and it sounded to me like he was playing but not really hitting everything, and it sounded strange to me. It took me a minute to get into some of those guys, but then of course I went through certain phases of John Coltrane, more of the post Coltrane saxophonist more than John Coltrane himself.
Uh-huh.
I was into like Dave Liebman and Steve Grossman and Michael Brecker, the way they and the way Bob Berg and the way these guys sort of approached that post thing, because I could go see those guys live and I could see those guys playing with different bands.
Yeah.
So like I owned all the records to Interstellar Space, but I didn't really play those records all that much.
Yeah.
I was more or less at that time. I was listening to so many different things at the same time, so many different saxophone players. Like you mentioned, I would listen to like certain things I liked that James Moody did, certain things that Johnny Griffin did. And then I was really influenced by the Elvin Jones records that had Liebman and Grossman on those records.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and then I could go
Lighthouse
see
in
Liebman play live, and I could get together with him, you know, and so that stuff influenced me a lot. And but then, you know, it's so funny, and I'm sure it's the same with guys like, you know, yourself, because we're all doing, you know, the same kind of thing as far as like playing our own music and playing, and I hear, you know, you're at as high a level as anybody out there. Is we're all in the same group of like players trying to play our instrument, you know what I mean?
Trying to figure it out, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And so and then you slowly sort of morph into like what sort of you want to play with, and that'll still allow you to improvise and get a freedom on your instrument.
Yeah.
It's sort of like it's a search that never ends. It's part of the curse.
Yes, it is.
It really,
Kind of gently grabs us around the throat.
yeah, you know, it's even like writing new music and stuff. You know, when I get into a record, I can be totally absorbed in it, but I can hate it, love it, hate it, love it, hate it, love it. You know, work on tunes for days and then not like them and start on something else. And it's just, but then when you finally get something that you like that you can actually use, then it's you know, it feels good. But man, it can be work digging it out of the dirt. You know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely,
But,
absolutely. So, what drew you to the saxophone? And the other question I had is, did you start on a different instrument first?
Piano.
You started on piano, okay.
Yeah.
And was it mainly classical, or were you already improvising in early?
No, it was mainly classical. I started when I was like about 6 years old. My dad was showing me how to play classical pieces by ear, which I didn't know is a really great thing. You know, Shostakovich and the Haydn Concerto and everything. I knew these things by heart when I was like 7 years old,
Wow.
going up and down the keyboard. And he'd come back from work and show me 4 or 5 more bars, and I couldn't wait to, let's go from here. And then they'd say, well, okay, you're ready. And then he'd show me a few other things. It was really awesome. But no, then saxophone was interesting because I was in 6th grade going into 7th grade, and the high school jazz band was giving a concert. And my mother said, let's go hear the jazz band. They have a piano in there. I'm like, okay, great. Because I wanted to get into jazz piano.
Yeah.
And this alto player sounded like Bird. He was influenced by Bird. His name was Barry Miller. And he stepped out in front of the band and started taking a solo. The spotlight went on him. And I'll never forget this. And I looked at my mother and I said, oh my God, I got to do that. I've got to do that. and the girl who was playing piano was playing this upright that was almost behind the curtain. And I'm like, I'm not going to do, what is that? It's not happening. And this alto player is playing. He was getting a great sound. He was actually one of the better high school kids in the Chicagoland area, And she goes, but you play piano. I said, I'll always play piano, but this is what I want to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
so that was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, right on. Right on. All right. So let's do this, Bill. Let's play a tune of yours.
Okay.
We've been yakking here for a little while. And this is kind of a nice transition into some of the music you sent me the other day.
Okay.
Do you want to do Right Lady first?
Sure.
Why don't you set it up?
All right. There's so many different singers that are my favorite singers. And I wanted to do a record, which is from the Rise Above record. And I wanted to do a record where I could write a song and record it with some of my favorite singers.
Uh-huh.
And Anders Osborne is one of those guys. So no, this is J.J. Gray. That's right. So it was J.J. Gray, Anders Osborne, Warren Haynes, and Greg Allman. And J.J. Gray just knocked this one out like all the other guys knocked their tunes out on the record as well. And this is one of my favorite songs. It's called Right Lady with J.J. Gray singing. And he co-wrote it with me.
Right on. And Marco Benevento is on this also. And Joe Russo, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
Great.
Yeah, they sounded great. Everybody. Dave Anderson, it was awesome.
Yeah. All right, well, here we go. I can't hear you. I've got the music too loud.
Spend your life looking around trying to find the right lady. But how much slack are you willing to give? All them words about how to the skin deep, baby. Our brother who you trying to keep. Tell me you don't know what I'm talking about. Go with what you're Keep your head together. All your soul is all you got. Keep your head together. All your soul is all you got. Keep your head together. All your soul is all you got. Keep your
Damn it, Bill. That's crushing, man. It's so beautiful.
Man,
Oh,
JJ sounded so great on that.
oh man, all you cats sound so beautiful on that. It's fantastic. I mean, there's just so much going on in there, and you
The
know, it's
hardest part is trying to figure out where to put the saxophone sometimes. You know, when I'm working with tunes with vocals and stuff, I get so into the vocal part. And I'm like, oh shoot, I got to try to find a place to put the saxophone. I'm thinking saxophone. How am I going to do that?
well, you know, one of the things I was thinking about in the middle of that
Mhm.
was that you have such a vocal approach on the instrument. Also, obviously influenced by vocalists. You're a vocalist yourself. You're a multi-instrumentalist, obviously, and but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. I mean, you kind of addressed it there, working with the vocalist, but also being a vocalist, having the horn sort of be your voice, also like a literal vocal voice in the way that you play. Even though you're scrambling up them eggs so beautifully, you still get this vocal approach to it, you know. And I was just wondering if you could maybe address that, kind of how you listen when you're in the middle of something like that. Just kind of your approach on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know, a saxophone is so close to a human voice. You know, I mean,
Mhm.
people can really relate to that. But on the other hand, you know, there's nothing like a human voice as far as like with an audience. You know, the minute you sing one tune, you could draw the whole audience right into a number. You know, and I like singing a tune and going right to a saxophone. You know, so it's like you can express yourself on both instruments, so to say.
Mm.
But I look at vocals as another instrument. You know, the same as
Of course.
obviously, you know, saxophone is better than the other instruments. We
Duh.
know this.
Yeah, that's without
But
saying. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I mean, I just
I'm glad you said it.
I do approach it as like a vocal instrument as well, like,
Mhm.
except when I'm going like, you know, scrambled egg land,
Yeah.
uh, you know, and it's like going into like the interstellar space dimensions, as they call
Right.
it. You know,
Right.
those moments when you're on stage and you're playing and you're getting into it, and all of a sudden you realize you're facing completely the opposite direction as when you first started your solo.
Yeah.
There was one time on stage with my band, and we were in Europe somewhere, and there was a big orchestra pit that was right below us, and it was a big festival. And I'd closed my eyes, and I thought I was about 10 feet away from this thing.
Uh-huh.
Evidently, I was playing, and I was slowly taking these steps forward, and I never fell, but the whole audience was watching me as one foot would kind of go over, and then I'd go back and and I could hear in the back of my mind this, you know, they're thinking I was going to take the big plunge. I didn't realize later on that everybody was hoping I was going to stay on. But anyway, you know, you get so into it, you know, but
Right.
that's what happens when, you know, as you know, when you're with Dave Matthews Band or your band, when you're getting there and you're thrashing, you're just
Mhm.
getting down
Mhm.
in another place,
Yeah.
which is like so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's transformative. It's like an out of body experience of sorts.
It is for sure. And that's what's on this pandemic thing. I didn't realize I haven't had this much time off to not play a gig and get into that space in 40 years. And you start to almost lose your identity a little bit. You're like, you wake up and it's like, this is weird.
Yeah.
This is like a sci-fi flick. So you get into other stuff. You know, I started taking Spanish lessons, and I started, you know, you start painting more. You start getting into the other things to put that energy somewhere. But you start to realize, after you haven't been able to get on stage and do it, how much you cherish that.
Yeah.
You know, how much that's a part of what you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Crazy, man.
Yeah.
And
I just got a text from a friend of mine, Greg Kessler, who's a wonderful photographer up in New York. He and his son Ezra are watching, and Ezra's a young drummer. He's, I don't know, 13, 14 years old,
awesome.
and he goes out to the park every day and busks with friends of his, and like he'll just go up to cats that are playing there and like make music with them.
That's
I
cool.
mean, what a beautiful experience to do that, and that's,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things about New York, is that those opportunities are there,
Yeah.
and that's, I think that's one of the things we really miss is those relationships that we have with other people, those moments like you're talking about, that it's transcendent, that we are so present, and so in that moment, that everything is connected. There's no disconnect from anything in the universe, basically. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to explain unless you've actually been in that place.
Yeah.
Um,
That's right. And
but
it's
that's
Yeah, and it's a crazy thing because it's like when you're on the road and it can be so hard. And you're so happy to be on the road just to do your thing. But there have been those moments where you're so exhausted and you've been doing one-nighters. Like I mostly play in Europe and we'll be just traveling all day or 2 or 3 planes. And you're doing all this for that 1 or 2 moments on stage when it feels perfect.
hmm
Everything is just leading up to that moment where it's like, ah, this
yeah,
feels so good to be here.
yeah,
Where there's a connection with the audience, connection with the band. Everything is working at that time, and everything is leading up to that time. You're like, and it's so funny because you get up in the morning, let's say 4 o'clock in the morning, you feel like shit. You haven't slept. It's horrible. You're like, oh God, I hate this. And then you like get in the van, you go to the airport, and the guy says, "What have you got in this case?" And I'm like, "It's a saxophone." All right. And I talk my way onto the airplane, and I tell them I'm going to play some charity event or something. Completely made up. Sorry. And then you've done this all day long. And then finally you get to the sound check, you do the sound check, everybody goes out to eat dinner. And then when you can hear the audience and then you start to play again, and all of a sudden you have this adrenaline and this feels amazing. And then you're playing, the horn feels good. And everything just comes together at like this zenith right then.
yeah.
But the dues you have to pay to get there sometimes.
It's
Damn.
tough, man. I mean, that's, it's not an easy choice that we've made, certainly.
Oh, man.
But the rewards are high.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite moments ever is when I'm experiencing the band breathing and moving as one unit. Like if like I'll look across stage, and it's going like this,
Yeah. That's amazing.
everybody together, and it's like it's an organism at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the audience, the way that the interaction is, these relationships are very important and very profound, and as hard as it is, I can't imagine ever doing anything else, man.
Yeah. I know.
I mean, I love teaching, and that's a very important part of what I do, but I have to have a balance of that live as well, to be able to mix it up, to really be able to get in the trenches with each other. And it's
It's a thing. It's
it's
definitely
missed.
Yeah. And that's why in the future I haven't done a lot of teaching, and I've spent my whole life learning as a student of the music, and I've sort of broken it down to what I thought is the most important things to do to be a player, and like I'm always thinking, since I'm always visualizing what I want the band to sound like, I'm always visualizing what I want my playing to sound like from an
Mhm.
early age. Like, what is the most important thing that's going to make a student sound better to where they want to go? It's not how much, there's so much information and there's so many ways, and there's a million ways to say the same thing, but
Mhm.
just a few ways that will actually make a difference. And
So such as like,
well, you know what I started doing? I would take like 2 or 3 2-5-1 lines, and there's a million of them out there and a million ways to do it. And I would record myself, and I'd want to make sure that every line I played made sense. Every note I played made sense. And if it didn't, I would stop.
Hmm.
And in a very short period of time, my playing went from A to Z, probably in about a 2-month period when I was in college.
Hmm.
People said, wow, your playing has really changed, because I started just concentrating on the end result. Do you know what I mean? To where it was like, I would take several lines, really, really learn them, start to turn those around, so that every time I played a line, from beginning to the end of this line, it was swinging, the sound was good, that line sounded great, and I spent time on that.
hmm.
And then I would make sure that I'd figure out some other line and a little variation of that, but I made sure that that sounded as good as it could sound. And then I started playing solos when I was improvising, keeping that whole theory in mind, so
Mhm.
that I would slow it down, so that I started playing solos that really started sounding good from beginning to end, with my sound, with the projection, with the lines I was playing. And I would record it and I'd go, all right. Say I was like, you know, and I started I'd stop, eliminate that. And I would consciously make an effort to do that. I used to talk to Miles about this all the time. But he'd be talking about his stories with Charlie Parker and this and that. And I'm like, I can't believe I did it. But anyway, yeah, and it made sense to the point where all of a sudden the more I visualized the end result of what I wanted to sound like and practice that way, I sounded better.
Yeah.
And it seemed to make a difference.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense, man. Makes a lot of sense. So let's jump into Miles a little bit. I'm curious, how old were you when you met him? Were you out of college? I guess that's a better question. Were you out of college?
By a month.
By a month.
It was like February or so of 1980.
Okay.
So I was like, let's see, 22.
Okay. And
21 going into 22.
Yeah. And how did you guys meet?
Well, he put an advertisement in the paper and he said, looking for a saxophonist. I'm coming out of music and I've done some really cool things and people dig me and come and audition, man. No.
Answered an ad. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. No, Liebman recommended me. Dave Liebman recommended me.
Yeah.
And
so you had been studying with Dave?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, Dave, it was a cool way because he lived in the city and everything. He'd play drums and I'd play saxophone and we'd talk about things and throw things around. It was really cool. And, you know, he's got so much knowledge. I mean, it's
unbelievable.
Intimidating. I mean,
it's like Yoda.
Yeah, it's intimidating. I mean, he's one of the smartest guys I've ever met.
For sure.
But anyway, so Miles had called Dave and said, I guess that he wanted to get together. He wanted to start playing again. And can he recommend a young saxophonist? And Dave recommended me. Mm-hmm. So I gave Dave $1 million. That was he said, if you give me $1 million, I'll get you Miles. So Dave was rich, retired, moved down to the Bahamas after that. And I got the gig. No. And that was kind of it. It was as simple as that. I went out, but I had to go up and play for him. Yeah. And that was the nerve-wracking part of it.
What was that like?
Oh my God.
You got to remember that, right? That's going to be a moment that is like seared in your brain.
Well, you can imagine. Here, I got my son. Like when I show up there and he's like, you know, literally he's got his sunglasses on. He's got a red leather coat on. He's looking completely badass. And it's like, and he says, well, I'll do the setup. So anyway, the night before he calls and he says, he goes, yeah, hey, listen, are you better than John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, Lester Young? And he's listing all these saxophone players. He said, you better than them? And I said, listen, man, I said, I'm just going to try to play as good as I can play. I don't know. How do I react to that? You know, I'm stumbling around on my words and I hear him on the phone going, because here's Miles Davis talking to this 21-year-old kid, you know, completely flooring me. And I'm like, and he says, all right, get your horn, bring your soprano over to my place tomorrow. I want to hear you play. All right. And then I got the address and he had the time. He says, call on the corner. He's on 77th Street in West End. And I'm like, oh my God. I was living in a loft with other musicians. It's all coming down to this. I'm like, you know, if you screw this up, you're done. And so anyway, the next day I went to the corner and you know, what's really funny? At the payphone on the corner, Mel Lewis was walking by. And, you know, the drummer, Mel Lewis, he says, what are you trying to do? Call Miles Davis on the phone? And I said, as a matter of fact, I got Miles Davis on the phone. Thank you very much. True story. So I hung up and I went over there and it was amazing to say, yeah, that's the guy that from all the records. That's the funniest thing. It's like, wow, that's him. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And he had some girl there that answered the door. Yeah, Miles is waiting for you, you know, blah, blah, blah. And Bobby Irving was in town with Vince Wilburn, and Vince had his own band and everything. And those guys were doing their thing. And Miles says, Bobby, come down here. Play a blues. So he's playing a blues. And Miles says, get your horn out.
Whoops, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, it's all right. So I got my soprano out, and now he's got these glasses on, and he's standing like, and he gets right next to me, like, then Bobby starts playing this blues in G or F or something like that, and he looks at me and he says, "Play," and I'm going, "Oh my god!" So I just started soloing. I'm just playing. I don't even remember the horn being in my mouth. So I play for a while, and he stops. He looks at me. He goes, "If I were to play saxophone, I'd like to play just like you. You sound great, man. Let's go get something to eat." I went, "Whew. Wow, okay, wow." I was like, he made me feel a little better. And that's how it got started, man. It was crazy.
Uh-huh.
Scared the
So,
shit
so,
out of me.
you don't seem like a person who's easily intimidated,
I was
but,
intimidated.
but being with Miles, it must have been really, I mean, how do you deal with something like that?
Our personalities meshed. So it's like I learned a lot as far as like what to do, what not to do, and he respected my judgment on things.
Mm.
And so I wasn't going to bullshit with him and say something like, and just yes him to death. He hated that. So we became friends where, he'd ask me a lot of musical questions, and we spent a lot of time talking about music, and at that time, and also going around the city. And I was also felt sort of responsible for making sure he didn't get himself into trouble. You know what I mean? Which he could do very easily.
Sure.
So I carried him out of a couple bars a couple times,
Hmm.
picked him up and carried him out. He
Yeah.
looks at me, "Where you?" And I'm like, "Dude, you're a little smaller than me." And
Don't make me kick your ass, Miles.
yeah, well, no, I mean, but he respected me, and he like,
Of course, yeah.
"Out of your bill." And I'm like, "Miles, don't do this, man." Yeah, I'm gonna write some. I'll put it out in some. I want to write a book someday, but only a short part of the Miles phase, but
Yeah.
some of it will be in
Yeah.
there. But yeah,
So-
it was a real. There's some real. Put it this way: there's some stuff that would have been even more interesting than the crazy Hollywood movie that they just did, which was fictional.
Yeah.
The stuff that we ended up going on that was real and live would have made that stuff look tame. I'm not kidding. It was a crazy period for him, and I feel glad to have been around him to have made sure that he didn't get himself into too much trouble where he never would have played again.
Well, it's interesting too, man, because there must have been. I mean, he seems like he was a very intuitive human being.
Oh yeah, very much.
And it seems that there must have been something about you, and I can understand this now, knowing you a little bit as I do. There must have been something about you that he recognized. Here's a very stable, solid human being that he could trust. Also, that wasn't going to bullshit him. That was going to be honest and straight with him. But you are a very kind human being, also, and you know that. And so there must have been something with Miles that he recognized something in you, that this is a person that I should be around.
Well, he didn't like anybody jive. So it's like, and here's this white Midwestern kid, completely straight ahead, raised by great parents. And it was, with morals and et cetera, et cetera. And I think I think that worked for him as far as like for him coming out of 5 years of not being involved in music. And I was also going to clubs every single night, for the last couple of years before that, including the last year of William Patterson College, so which is just a half hour outside of New York. So I was very much in tune with what was going on with musicians too. So when he said, "All right, we got to get in the studio, and who do you recommend on bass?" And I'd been hearing Marcus Miller in clubs all the time, and I said, "I know a guy," and he said, "What's his name?" I said, "Marcus Miller." So he said, "Do you have his number?" I said, "No, but I can get it." He said, "I can get it." So he called CBS. "Give me Marcus Miller."
He says, "I can get it."
Yeah. So I mean, that's how kind of, that's, and he trusted, I said, "Believe me, he's the guy."
Yeah.
I said he's producing a lot of stuff. Marcus was at that time was producing a lot of different guys, even at his young age. We're the same age. And it just, he says, "Okay, great." And that's kind of how it worked, even with like when we first started, like with the guys that we were working with at that time in that first year in and out of the studio, he wanted another guitar player. Barry Finnerty was playing with him at the time, and he kept saying, for the studio and stuff, and it wasn't working out for him as far as personality wise and whatever. And he kept coming up to me saying, I think I want another guitar player. is there somebody you could recommend? So far, you're one for one when I'm talking about Marcus. I said, yeah, I know a guy, Mike Stern. I'd played with him up in Boston. And so he trusted me and he liked Mike. And then that's how, and I got Schofield in the band the same way. But he just trusted my judgment. But he kept saying, the minute you screw up and get me somebody I don't like, I'm never going to ask you.
Hey, now wasn't there a story about when Schofield came on the band that Mike didn't know that he was coming to the gig? Is that right?
That's true. Miles asked me, it's interesting because Miles had asked me at the sound check, the road manager, Jim Rose, says, Miles wants to speak to you on the phone. Sometimes he wouldn't come to the sound check. Sometimes he would, but it wasn't uncommon for him to call me at the sound check and say, how's it going? But this time he said, I want another guitar player tonight. And I said, okay, you got somebody. And I'm thinking, and at the time, honestly, I was thinking either John or Chuck Loeb or Jimmy Tunnell. Those are the three guys I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, and at the same time, I'm thinking of like, who would be best for the band? I mean, they could all play great. They'd all be great for the band. But I thought at this time, Schofield would be great. I mean, I'll just try. I said, John Schofield. He goes, well, whoever he is, call him. And I said, okay. So that's what happened. So I called John a minute later. And I said, John, what are you up to? Hey, man, what's going on? I said, we're in Columbus, Ohio. Can you get on the next plane and come out and do this gig with us tonight? And he goes, are you kidding? I said, like now. And so he showed up an hour and a half later, 2 hours later, and we're still in the hall. And Stern was on stage kind of playing his guitar. And then John started walking up the aisle. And Mike sees him and says, hey, John, what's going on? Oh, no. I can hear what's happening? Oh, no, am I losing my gig? And he's going crazy. And it's just, but Miles had used two guitar players before on stuff, but I could see Mike is happy. He goes, oh, there's John. Oh, no. It was funny.
Interesting. So is there any like kind of an overlying perspective, musical or otherwise, that you kind of took away from your time with Miles?
Yeah. To do the music that you feel is the music you want to do. Mm-hmm. That's what really took. And I like, and rhythm. I always like drums and different drummers. I love great drummers and rhythm and grooves and funk and soul. I just love that. I always have. Yeah. And that's why, I want to do a straight ahead record sometime. I mean, that's what I do all day. When I practice, I'm playing straight ahead all day long. That's what I do, because that's how you get more fluid on your instrument. There's no better way to get fluid on your instrument. I mean, I'll play with the Jamie Masol records. I've known Jamie since I was 13 years old, and I'm constantly trying to say more on my instrument. And I'm losing my train of thought. What was the question?
Kind of the perspective, like doing your own thing, and then you're talking about like eventually. Yeah,
with Miles, right? No, it just gave me the perspective also to give the guys in your band the freedom to feel good, to feel good about what they, not, and I didn't take everything that Miles did. Miles would have sort of his dark moments here and there, you know what I mean? And I don't think you're going to get the best out of people by doing that. You know what I mean? I think if you can Miles was an expert at trying to figure out each person. Each person had their own relationship with him. You know what I mean? Some people would come in and out of the band. They didn't get to know him at all. I was fortunate because we got to be really good friends in the very beginning when he came out of his retirement. So before almost every gig, we'd spend time together in his room, in the band is in the band room. And he wouldn't even want to talk music or anything. We'd just talk about boxing, or we'd talk about anything else, but not music. And let's say the show's at 8:00. We'd sit in there, it could be 8:25 and we're still talking, and I'm not pushing him on it. and then he'd look at me out of the blue and say, hey man, you want to play? I'd say, yeah. And he'd go, let's go. And then it was time to go. It could be at 8:10. It could be at 8:30. It could be a 8:45. And I'm getting nervous because I'm thinking you could kind of hear the crowd. He's not worried about it.
Yeah.
But then again, he's one of a kind. But I just to kind of make guys in the band feel comfortable. You know what I mean? And try to do the music that you really hear. And that's the only formula I've tried to really keep. Just because whatever's inspirational to you is you're going to be doing it for real. If you say, I'm going to try this music, if you don't feel it, it's going to sound like you're trying.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never been able to do that.
Yeah.
So I've never thought like the record I did when I first heard you and Bela and Victor Wooten and what a great band, right?
Mm.
I didn't know what you guys were up to at all. I just heard Americana in my head, and I wanted to play with a banjo for the Soulgrass record.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what the band was sounding like, or if you guys were playing in a small club for 20 people, and I didn't know anything about anybody. So it was like when I came to see the show in New Jersey, it was in a big hall, it's packed, and the band was larger than life. And I remember going on your tour bus and saying to you guys, is this what you guys do every day? Holy shit. I mean, because I just heard this music. I thought banjo, and someone mentioned Bela Fleck. Well, that's right. Bela Fleck's a banjo player. That's a good start. Perfect start for what I hear in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Did I know how large it was? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I had no idea. And so I'm listening to you guys, and I'm hearing this band, and I'm like, saxophone player's killing, the bass player's ridiculous. I'm like, holy shit. It was like, blew the whole thing wide open to my, because I had no idea.
Yeah.
But you know, you get this idea, and then the idea grows, and you go with it, and you just see where it's going to take you. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. You know, you said something a little earlier that kind of keyed into one of my other questions. I just have a couple more questions, and I want to play another tune, and we'll kind of take it out with that.
Sure.
But in your career, you've worked with a lot of people in your career. Some of the sort of the outliers to me are people like Miles, Herbie Hancock, John McLaughlin with Mahavishnu, Mick Jagger, Mike Stern, Robin Ford. Robin lives here now. Brilliant guitarist. He's become a good friend, and we actually did a session together with Robin, which was so much fun.
The Chainsaw Reeds.
The Chainsaw Reeds. That's right. Yeah, and so I'm just wondering if you could briefly talk about the importance of relationships to you.
Right.
I'll just kind of leave it there.
Well, it's really hard to say, really. No, you could be like the jazz guy and go, yeah, man, it's really important, man, to like, you know, be cool with everybody, man. Peace out. No.
Man, not everybody brings props to an interview. I got to give it to you, man.
Yeah, that's right.
You got shit for days over there.
No, but relationships, you know, it's so funny because Joe Zawinul, with my band Push in the 90s, I had this killer band. We only played in Europe. I mean, literally.
I had those records. Yeah.
We were building it. We had like 9 guys in the band. We were tour buses. Crazy. I mean, it was really wild. It was a really great time to be in my band at that time, as a matter of fact. A lot of fun, a lot of debauchery going on full time.
Yeah, sure there was.
Beautiful thing. But okay, where was I? No, but we play opposite Joe Zawinul's band, and Joe was having like this psychological war with everybody in the band. So it's like the guy, he'd be on stage saying like, hey man, you're not playing the fucking bass correctly. Would you, I mean, he's screaming at the guys occasionally. The bands sounded amazing, musicians amazing, but he was doing this real psychological warfare where these guys were not in good mood sometimes. And I'd see them afterwards and they're just down and depressed, and they see us and we're happy, we're up, we're having a great time. And I knew Joe a little bit, but I didn't have to play with Joe. So we were friends and we'd always have breakfast together and stuff like that. And I'd say, Joe, isn't it tense when you create these weird sort of vibes on stage? I mean, he goes, no, I'm trying to get the best out of these musicians. And I'm saying, I don't know if you get the best out of me. He goes, I do, man. It's this tension that creates this real creativity. And I'm like, I disagree. I would say point blank, I disagree. I just don't think that's the way to create music, because it's just weird. So relationships, yeah, I mean, I think if you like the guys you're with, I mean, for me, especially when I get new players and guys in the band, and especially in Nashville, I'd love to get a whole new band of the young guys.
Yeah, of course.
So many great players here.
Mm-hmm.
I always ask what the person is like first before they even, if someone is a great player, but they have a bad reputation as a person, I'm not interested. I don't want to create music with this guy. I mean, you have to spend so much time with these guys. And there's so many other players. There's so many players and so many good players that are good people.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're not a good person first, I'm not interested,
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's the relationship thing, I think,
Yeah, no, I'm hit, man. I totally agree. Yeah. So look, my last question, and then we'll play another tune and say goodnight to the good people who are tuning into this.
Mhm.
How have your weaknesses influenced what you do and how you do it?
Well, Jeff, I wish I could. I've been looking for those weaknesses. And no, I mean, well, you know how, I mean, with the saxophone, sometimes it feels amazing. You can play whatever you hear in your head. And sometimes it feels like a piece of, like a wrench that I keep in the garage. You know, it's
Yeah.
like you're playing this thing and it's like, damn you, you know?
Yeah.
And other times it's like, yeah, you know? So
Uh-huh.
it's like, I would say one of the weaknesses is I'm always trying to be more fluid, to say more, and sometimes it's always a fight. It's always a fight to do that. I never feel like I can say enough on it. And I like, you know, in the recent years I've just started to sing, and I like to sing, and I'll never be a great singer because there are some amazing singers out there. But it's another instrument for me. I like working on it. I'm the definitive student, so I'm always trying to be a better singer, and it's always taking me time to try to do that. So the weaknesses are always, I see them every day. So I have to like, that's really what I see. You know what I mean?
Sure.
When I'm playing saxophone or tenor, soprano, whatever, all I see for myself are the weaknesses.
Hmm.
And when I'm trying to sing and get that together, so I spend all that time looking at weaknesses. And so it's like, hey God, it's like, what now? You know, but I think that, but that's normal, you know, but
I think so too.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, but you know, that's a great question, because it's like if I had to like not ever do gigs and just practice and see the weaknesses all the time,
Oh,
I'd be losing my freaking mind, man.
yeah. Yeah.
I'd
Me
be
too.
losing my mind. It would
Me
drive me
too.
nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about yourself? I mean, what do you see like with that? Just to, you know, with that particular question yourself. I mean, it's
Well, I think my weaknesses have had a lot more to do with my success than my strengths, quite honestly.
mhm, mhm,
And you know, the things that I recognize that I need to work on
mhm.
as a musician and as a person,
Yeah,
you know, have a lot to do with the work that I put in. You know, I'm a workaholic, man. I love being busy. I love doing things. I
yeah,
love, you know, really digging into stuff,
yeah,
and I still work hard. You know, you were talking earlier about, excuse me, you know, playing straight ahead stuff all day. You know, my practice sessions are working on tunes in 12 keys.
yeah. Right, right,
You
right.
know, and the stuff that I have my students working on is stuff that I'm still working on,
Sure,
and it's stuff
absolutely.
that makes a huge difference in my playing. And but yeah, I mean, I record myself, I listen back to it, and I'm like, oh shit, I wish I had that one back, you know. And but yeah, all you can do, I think, is recognize and evaluate your strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah,
and work on the things that you're like, man, I'm not as good at this as I should be.
right.
And
And that's lifelong. It's a life.
yeah, and I'm inspired by people that do things well, man. I'm inspired by a lot of young players who are out there just crushing it, you know, that are, um, you know, really saying something on their instruments. And I'm in you know, incredibly inspired by people like Wayne Shorter, you know, and Sonny Rollins. But they're not playing anymore. You know, they're sort of towards the end of their careers, and but they're still writing, still, you know,
Yeah,
expressing and still teaching
sure.
us, you know,
Yeah,
through
yeah,
who
yeah,
they are as people. And so I think that we're very fortunate to still have some of the masters around
yeah,
that, regardless of whether they're playing their instruments or not, they're still making music,
yeah.
and they're still creating.
Absolutely. And you know, and an interesting point, as far as like, you know, coming up, when I was coming up, there were bands like Elvin Jones, and not so much Miles because he had retired at the time when I was in high school, but Buddy Rich's band, Elvin Jones, Horace Silver. There were like
Mhm.
these different Cedar Walton quintet. There were these different bands you could shoot for. And I know it when I've done clinics where saxophone players will say, well, you know, it's hard to try to figure out what we're going to shoot for. You know, there's so many
Mm.
jazz guys that are coming out of school, and it's like they graduate, they teach more students who end up teaching as well, and it just keeps this conundrum. And I keep saying some of the best groups are not put together yet. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? There's going to be some of the most creative bands that some of these young players are going to be into, that they're going to help create, and they're going to help to be in. Uh, that's going to help push music forward. And there's a whole world of these bands are going to start up, or they're already created now, you know. So it's like you don't have to necessarily see them in front of you right now.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you have your playing to a certain point, then when you get to that point, whether it's not where you're standing in front of Miles playing a blues, but you have your playing at a level that you're ready for a situation to occur, you're prepared for it, and it can change your life overnight.
Yeah.
You know.
True. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's happened to me twice with the Flecktones and then Dave Matthews.
There you go.
So I get it. I get it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
well, hey, Bill Evans has been my guest. Thank you so much, man, for hanging out with me. And
Well, anytime,
talking.
man.
And Bill Evans Sax is the website, BillEvansSax.com. There's a lot of information here, man, to think about tonight. And so we have a couple of other tunes that you had sent to me. We have Dragonfly and What's Your Wallaby. What's your poison here to take these people out with?
Let's try What's Your Wallaby. That's with me and the Spy Killers, which is like Wolfgang Hafner on drums, who's one of the great drummers in the world. He lives in Germany. He's super well known in Europe. He just doesn't get a chance to play in the States that much.
Yeah.
Simon Oslander, a very young, great keyboard player in Germany as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Gary Granger, who's an amazing drummer and grew up playing with Dennis Chambers in Washington, in Baltimore. And this is a gig in Australia 2 years ago. And I formed a band right from that gig. Yeah, I put it together just for that gig, just to have fun for the gig. And then after that, it was so much fun that we ended up doing tours of Europe together.
Right on.
This is a tune that I wrote for that.
All right, so this is about 7 minutes long, and then we'll say goodbye after that. And here it is, Watch a Wallaby. And again, BillEvansSax.com, and you can find all things Bill Evans there. And here we go. Huh. Meow. Yeah. Just chilling.
Oh yeah. Bad, right?
Yeah. Crushing.
21 at the time.
Huh. Wow. Killing, Bill. Really beautiful. Man. Really beautiful. So we're going to kind of put this on softly here as we go out. This is Dragonfly.
Well, thanks for having me on your show, man.
Oh man, what a pleasure! What an absolute pleasure.
You're like one of the great saxophonists, and you're one of the guys that's open to all kinds of music. It's awesome, man.
Oh well, thanks, man.
You're like
Thanks.
a
Well,
rare-
you know,
like a rare
you're
breed.
part of the reason that I'm open to a lot of different styles of music. So you know, thank you. And again, thanks for spending some time with me and for just talking about all this stuff, man. You know, I'm looking forward to having brunch with you and Rebecca tomorrow. And
Absolutely.
there were a number of people that were recognizing Jordy on the screen there, and but once again, everybody, my very special guest tonight, the great Bill Evans, saxophonist, living in Nashville. We're so happy you're here, man,
Pleasure to
and
be here.
I'm looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow and hanging out a bit and socially distanced brunch, as it were. And
Well, ever since I got here, I start to talk like this now. You know
yes,
what I'm
you
talking about. I
have.
mean, everybody, guys come up here and say, "Listen, man, you can call me Rooster and my good friend Clem over here and everything." No, but a little bit of truth to that. But no, it's beautiful down there. It's gorgeous down there. There's so many musicians here in Nashville. It's crazy.
Yeah, there sure are. There
Great
sure
place.
are.
Very alive, creative place.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. So, all right. Well, Bill, once again, BillEvansSax.com is the website. You can check out all things Bill Evans there. And, we'll see you guys next Friday. We'll be back. And I have no idea what we're going to be doing yet, but I'll be here. And once again, Bill, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Real pleasure. And
It's a pleasure it's an honor to be on your show, man.
thank you, brother. Thank you. All right. Take care, everybody. Take good care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we'll see you soon. Peace.